Hello and welcome to the Westcity Church podcast. If you'd like to get to know us more, find us at westcitychurch.com.au. We really hope that you're encouraged by today's message.
I don't know about you, but I just kind of have this sense that God's just really trying to remind us all about the source of where it all comes from. The gathering today is just not about information, doing duties. It's really about this remarkable expression of God loving us. Just that beautiful song, that one that said, oh, how he loves you and me. It's written by a man who wrote it when one of his best friends died in a car accident, who was, I believe, a young youth minister. And he was trying to come to terms with it. Like, it didn't make any sense and it was wrong. And he was trying to battle it and work out, what the heck is that about? And I think he started off writing a bit of an angry song. And then somehow it turned around to, oh, how he loves you and me. And if love is an ocean, we're all sinking. If grace is an ocean, we're all sinking. I just think not only are we supposed to have that relationship for us and God, but we're really supposed to have that for each other. Let's just take a couple of minutes just to talk to the person next to us, okay, and around us. Just make sure, let's have a little bit of a chat, watch everyone's okay, because it's incredibly important that we're all okay. Thank you. So have a chat. Have a chat. Okay. Oh, gosh, it's such a beautiful reminder, isn't it? Funny enough, I'm going to talk on Solomon this morning, and here's Solomon, who's a bit of a head man, really. He starts off as this guy of wisdom and in his head, in many respects. And we're in this series of Lent, and it's kind of like, the concept of Lent is, what do you want to sacrifice and give up, not just so that you deny yourself, but because you remind yourself that life is about something outside of you. It's about God. You don't stop having your coffees just because, I'm just going to discipline myself. Weird concepts. I think people we're all weird, because the concept of Jesus going into the desert wasn't to deny himself, it was to try to empty himself so that God could fill him. That's the idea, isn't it? And I think that when we hear stories of other people, they kind of give us all these little lessons and things that we can learn without having to go through the stuff ourselves. And I know that storytelling, and we understand people's struggle and then their wins, you know what I mean? And then we kind of get these little ideas out of it. And I think today I want to talk about this man Solomon, a little bit from his story and then kind of what came out of it for Solomon. But I was thinking about this idea about story. It's so huge in our culture right now, isn't it? Everything is tell story, share story, show stories, and there's so much storytelling focus that you almost think to yourself, it gets a little bit cliched, but at the same time, it is the way we learn stuff. And I love a program on ABC Radio called Conversations. Does anyone else like that? It's just one of my absolute favourites because it tells all these people's stories, and they're not famous people necessarily. And most of the time, their stories have come out of a struggle. Something has happened, And it's caused them just to see life differently for a period of time. And then they talk out, and it's just so beautiful. This last week I was listening to the story of the first woman commercial pilot in Australia. It's like, she's probably only about 5 years older than me. That's when you realise you're old, isn't it? They start saying things like that. Oh my gosh. But she was, it was just a fantastic story about what she had to overcome and become that commercial pilot. And she's still flying and still loving it, because she's actually very young, of course. But as I was thinking about Solomon, and he was one of my absolute heroes as a girl. I was at Sunday school, I was 9 years old, and I'm 8 or 9 because I know we were living in this area, and our church was the Luna Cinemas in Leederville. That was our church building, yeah. So we were at the Luna, going to church, called City Chapel. Anyone else there? Never know. No, I was on my own, obviously. But, but it really was happening. And anyway, they had Sunday school upstairs, and I was up there, and the day they were telling the story of this king called Solomon. I was enthralled. I was enthralled because they told the story of when 2 women were brought to him, and there was 2 babies. One baby had died in the night, and one baby had survived. Both the women were debating it was their child. And Solomon had to make the decision about who to give the baby to, and he's sitting there. He would have been a very young king. They reckon he came to become the king at around 15. How's that? And he's making this decision about which mother is the mother of this baby. And in the end, he says, well, what we'll do is we'll get out a sword and we'll cut the baby in half, and you can each have half of this baby. And very macabre for a 9-year-old's morning. But anyway, I was enthralled. And at the end of it, the one mother said, no, let her have the baby. And he said, you're the mother. And obviously it's this beautiful story of reuniting baby and mother. And everyone said, how wise is he? And I was like, how wise is he? And then they tell the story that's in 1 Kings 3. And a bit earlier in 1 Kings 3, in fact, just preceding that story is the story of he's become the king. And while he is the king, he has a dream. And in the dream, God appears to him and says, what would you like? Because I'll give you anything you want. And he says to God, you know what, God, my father David, because Solomon was the son of King David, my father David was this incredibly fantastic leader and a wealthy man, but what I ask of you is to give me wisdom. And I was like, man, I like that bit too. And I remember going home, even as a little girl, and saying that to God. God, I pray. And we lived here only for a couple of years before we went broke, so it was just a high period before a bit of a low. Let me just say, we were living in City Beach, and in fact, oh gosh, I might get a bit teary. It's a bit crazy, isn't it? Because my little brother, who is actually here now at my church here, was a tiny baby when that happened. And I remember I was in the lounge room in that house, went up to this formal lounge room on my own as a little girl, and I had him in my arms, and I remember I was praying to God and saying, if I can have one thing, may I have wisdom, God, from you. And it was incredible, heartfelt, and I said, and may he too. And I had this beautiful, praying as this little girl of I just totally loved God and had a sense that what Solomon was like, may we all have that in our lives. It was fantastic. And Solomon is this king who is renowned. Does everyone know him, by the way? I hope you do. After today, you're going to love him. But he was the second king of Israel after his father David, right? And he was the last king of a unified Israel. Okay? Second thing, he was enormously wealthy. I remember I read one account that in one day he had something like 28,000 kilograms of gold came into the court on one day. Just phenomenal wealth that this man had. He was very wise. His wisdom was renowned. The Queen of Sheba, and people came to get his counsel. And he's seen as being a man of great wisdom. And he actually wrote a number of books of the Bibles. He's ascribed to. There's always debate about who wrote what, but he's seen as writing 4 key books. What are the books he wrote? Proverbs. 3 books of wisdom, they're called, or 3 of the books. What else? Songs of Solomon. What else? Ecclesiastes. And there's other ones, there's another one called the Song of Wisdom or something. Their books are not currently in scriptures or in the canon of scripture right now, but he's seen as being an author of these. And I love who knows Proverbs that guide you in life? Who's got Proverbs that they've read? Like, I think if you don't read Proverbs, you're crackers, because that's a bit of an obvious thing, isn't it? But, because Proverbs is just this wealth of, you want to know how to live well? Read Proverbs. It's largely this idea of it's not just knowledge, right? It's more than that. There's a couple. One I love the proverb that says, life winds upward to stop it going downward to the grave. A wise man's life winds upward. In other words, life is never over. If we ever think we're winding down, the only place we go to is the grave. But the kind of idea that life is constantly winding upward, I really love that. I love this. One time I read this proverb, which was, the first man you hear on a topic sounds so wise and sounds so right until you hear the second person speak. And the encouragement is never just listen to the first voice on a subject. Hear the second man speak. And I know that for me is something I try to do. Someone comes to you, they tell you the story. How outrageous that person did that to you. That's how it tends to be our response. But you haven't heard the second person speak. Not only are you dishonouring the second person, you're actually dishonouring the first person, because you may be giving them really unwise counsel if you don't hear the whole story. I love that. I love the idea that the way of the wise winds upwards. I said, the world of the generous gets bigger and bigger, and the world of the stingy gets smaller and smaller. If your life is getting smaller and smaller, here's some advice. Get more generous. More generous with your friends. More generous with your sharing. More generous with your words. Because a stingy life gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And a life devoted to things is a dead life, a stump, and a God-shaped life is a flourishing tree. Oh gosh, there's so many about him. But I have to tell you that we don't just listen to someone's words, we've got to look at people's lives, don't we? And my mate Solomon, who I love dearly, was also a bit of a doozy. Okay? So let me tell you that Solomon, he was the last king of a unified Israel, because God said to him in the end, you've walked away from me and your kingdom's going to be lost. Not in your lifetime, but in your son's lifetime. So he was the last king of a unified Israel because of his own deeds. He married the daughter of the king of a pagan, who suffered pagan gods, the Egyptian king, just for convenience, so he could set some alliances. So he married a pagan queen when he'd said, I'm going to be devoted to God all the days of my life, for convenience. Do you think he would have given himself that advice, may I ask you? I always think about it. I think, golly, if you'd asked yourself, Solomon, you would have said, don't be an idiot. I think he came to the throne in conflict. Him and his mum, Bathsheba, went behind the scenes and manipulated so he could become the king, because he had an older brother who was going to become the king. But Bathsheba got David, while he was alive, to promise to hand it over to Solomon while he was alive, so that Solomon would, and him and Nathan, they kind of conspired so to make sure he could become the king. So there was conflict about him coming to the kingdom. Conflict in becoming king. And the fourth thing is that Solomon, instead of just pursuing wisdom, he pursued wealth enormously. He did pursue great power. And he also pursued a lot of women. I think he had 1,000 in his concubine. And what do you do with 1,000? I'm confused. 1,000! That is mind-boggling, is it not? You know, I look at that of Solomon and I think to myself, Solomon, gosh, you were fantastic. But you also were very, very human, weren't you? That sense of, it's just for me, it's always this reminder we're actually fragile. We want to be the best we can be. We actually do. But if you're not aware of the fragility of your own humanity, then you actually have a serious risk. And you know what? If you're the king with all of this power and you're wise and all these people looking to you, gosh, it would have been hard to take good counsel and keep yourself in check. I find it hard enough to keep myself in check. And I've got a lot of people telling me what to do. You know, you probably have too. We've all got a lot of people telling us what to do, and we still make mistakes consistently. I had this one time, I remember this lady coming to see me, and I'd spoken, I think, on forgiveness, and she made an appointment to see me. I was a pastor of a church. So she makes this appointment, and when she comes and sees me, she says, well, you know, basically she said, it's very easy for you to say forgiveness. You haven't really had to forgive something, which of course she wouldn't know. In fact, she was a bit right, okay, so let's not have a go on that. I hadn't had anything bad. But she says, my husband did this to me, and she proceeded to tell me the horrific things that she felt her husband had done. So I was just listening, and then I was listening, and I was, yeah. I said, oh, golly, that is a tough story, you know. And when did that happen? You know, I thought it must have happened in the last 6 months. She says, 25 years ago. I said, 25 years ago. Do you see what it's done to you? Because she was angry and she was bitter. I said, do you see what it's done? It's not that it's not true, but the forgiveness of Scripture would have shown her another way. And I was just reminded of the fact that we might know the right thing, but we just often don't do it. How many times do you not do what you think is the right thing? Please. There's some people down here, I'd like to see their hands if you don't mind. My nephews and my brother, hands up, please. They don't, sorry. I just think it's the splinter, as they say, in our own psyche of self. We most often just want to do what makes us feel good, what makes us look good, which makes us still have this facade of being good. And I think we just don't want to face the pain of it, of what we've got to see if it's going to be a hard thing to do. I was thinking about Solomon, and I was thinking I was kind of, putting all this together, and I was going, okay, so Solomon started with this idea of knowledge, right? Like, what was his... And then his kind of call, or the main thing that came out of Proverbs was the idea about knowledge on its own is not really what you want. What you want is wisdom. Because knowledge tends to be the application of facts and details and information, right? Wisdom is applying that to your life and to situations, to having perspective on it and see, gosh, how does that information actually work in practice? That's when you take something from this idea of knowledge to wisdom. And this is where Solomon's kind of wheelhouse was, And it was this idea of taking something solely out of the head but adding a bit of heart to it. But you know what? Something kind of went wrong somewhere in there for Solomon, because he failed to take what he actually knew was the right thing and actually kind of live it, certainly in some area of his life. When he got to the book of Ecclesiastes, he wrote this. Whack that scripture up for me if you could. I think it's just the second slide. He writes this, it's a bit small, but anyway, you get the gist. He says, read the first line, you'll be happy. Ecclesiastes says, I said to myself, I know more and am wiser than anyone before me in Jerusalem. I've stockpiled wisdom and knowledge. And what I finally concluded is that so-called wisdom and knowledge are mindless and witless, nothing but spitting into the wind. That's a bit terrifying when I love him for his wisdom. Nothing but spitting into the wind.
How good was that message? Thank you so much for joining us. Each week at West City, we say a benediction together. We do this because we believe that the purpose of the church is to be a caring community for the world, and that as we go and serve others, we enter into Christ's work of welcome, restoration and healing, both for us and others. We believe that in doing so, we get to see and encounter Christ. So let's say the benediction together. We come together as the church to be reminded of the go of Christ. So we will go out and feed the hungry, go out and clothe the naked, go out and fight for justice, go out and end oppression, go out and proclaim anew the old story, go out and associate with those who don't look like us, think like us, act like us, and don't even like us. And we'll do it all in the name of the one who sent us. His name is Jesus.